Welcome everyone who just joined to the 9th edition of our event, Dealing with Brexit Open Conversations. Before I start, I'd like to remind you that captions are available if you need them. My name is Silvia Morelli, and the Project Communications Manager at Extracts, a Manchester-based development organization for outdoor arts. I am a white woman in my late 30s. Sadly, I had to change it to late recently. I have shoulder-length brown wavy hair, I wear glasses, and today I'm wearing a scarf and a Christmas jumper. I use the pronouns she, her. As a reminder, our Dealing with Brexit events are designed to offer an informal space to encourage information sharing between peers around during post-Brexit. The event is supported by Arts Council England as part of Extract's ongoing work to support outdoor arts professionals to continue work internationally post-Brexit. You can find more Brexit resources on our website, and my colleague Irene will now put some links in the chat. Today, we are delighted to be joined by Jens Frimann Hansen, the Artistic Director of Passage Festival in Denmark and So Festival in the UK, and Toby Smith, the Associate Director at Festival.org, which comprises of Greenwich+Docklands Festival and Global Streets, who will share their experience on working with international artists from a festival organizer perspective. After hearing from them, we'll have about 20 minutes for a discussion together about some of the challenges that you might face and the questions that you might have. Again, this session is meant to be informal and to provide a supportive space for anyone with questions around carrying work post-Brexit. We might not have all the answers, but feel free to jump in by raising your hand or by popping your questions in the chat if you don't feel comfortable coming in. And just a note that any advice given in this space should not be considered as legal advice, but more as a starting point for discussion. And we'll start with Toby, who's got some issues with his voice today, but hopefully he'll be fine doing his bit of presentation. Go on, Toby.
Thank you, Sylvia. Yeah, so as you will know, I'm Toby Smith. I am a white middle-aged man with tortoiseshell glasses, short dark hair, a jumper that could necessarily be called Nordic and Christmas all at the same time. And my pronouns, which I forgot earlier, are he, him. As I said, I'm the Associate Director at Festival.org, where, among other things, I direct the Global Streets programme, which is a national touring programme bringing international artists from Europe and beyond into the UK and touring around 12 towns and cities across the UK with embedded audience development and participation opportunities. I work alongside Marie at Festival.org, and between us, we've negotiated the post-Brexit arrangements and indeed mixed up with that the COVID restrictions over that first year. And I think that work really spans visas and permission to work, freight as well, and more latterly international VAT, and I'll briefly cover all three of those over the next few minutes. Taking a step back, how's it been? Quite hard. We have brought a number of artists into the country both years and companies, and the first year was really tough for reasons I think we will all share. It was not really very clear at the beginning how to go about that. But I think latterly this summer, I think we realized that one of the reasons that 2021 was really hard is that COVID and the additional restrictions and the changing nature of those restrictions on top of the post-Brexit arrangements were really made the work a lot harder. And we have managed, I think the second time around that cycle this year, particularly on the visa front, we've managed to bring that workload down quite considerably. So it's feeling a little bit better than it was. It's still a lot of work. Just to give you an idea of the artists and the range of artists we work with, I brought in numerous companies from France over the last couple of years, from Belgium and the Netherlands. Dundu have been, I think, 3 times with different visa arrangements. In fact, actually, they're coming to Lewisham for the Borough of Culture closing event next week, and have just been doing their visas this morning. And one artist from the US, Yvette Matin. All of them, interestingly, over the last 2 years have entered the UK through the permitted paid engagement route, known as PPE, a slightly awkward acronym. And that route is not technically classed as employment. It allows artists to be paid and to stay in the UK for up to 1 month. And they need a valid passport. We advise them that it has at least 6 months to run, although we have had artists traveling on passports with less time to run, and it has been fine. And we do ask them a question up front, which is, have they had any previous issues or refusals at the UK border? Because if that is the case, PPE is not necessarily a good route for them. All of the artists that we work with as well have been what are termed non-visa nationals. They're people traveling on passports from the EU, the wider EU trade area, the US, a handful of Commonwealth countries, and a number of other countries besides. And all of them, as I say, have been staying for less than a month. So what I'm about to talk about, even though it is cumulatively has been a lot of work, is actually the relatively easy end of a far wider and more complex spectrum. For PPE, there are 2 ways to apply. I didn't know that before this started, because of course we didn't really need to do this before Brexit, but there are 2 ways to apply. For entry clearance well in advance of travel, or for permission to enter once they arrive at the UK border, and they're quite different processes. So I'm now going to talk a little bit about both of those and the pros and the cons between them. So the first one is what they call entry clearance in advance of travel. And that process is led by the artist and the company. And with that comes an immediate potential problem, because it's online, it's on the gov.uk website, there's no translation facility. And so it does rely on the artist having some knowledge or working knowledge of English to be able to negotiate that process. They can start it up to 3 months in advance of travel, and it's really time consuming. There's a long online application that then needs to be okayed. It then usually entails every member of the traveling company traveling to a visa identification center to do an ID check. That's often in the capital city and can be a long way from where the artists are based. And it costs £95 per visa. And I think morally, we feel that if the artists are giving up a day to travel to, in the case of a French artist, to Paris, that their time and indeed perhaps their travel to do that also needs to be factored into the process. So it's quite expensive too. And although one would use that route to be absolutely sure that the artists that you're inviting are going to get in, we have had experience of those applications in advance being declined, which sort of defeats the object of putting all of that time in advance to be sure that they're going to come. So it doesn't always work. Conversely, the opposite to that is for the artist to seek permission to enter when they arrive at the border. And this relies on the artist declaring that that's what they want to do when they arrive, and they present a pack of information that supports their case to enter to work in the UK. That documentation evidences that the engagement that they are being offered is legitimate through an invitation letter, printed out copies of the online listings for all of the venues on the tour, and that the engagement is fully funded. So potentially a copy of the contract, or at least an evidence that the fee is being paid, confirmation of all of the accommodation bookings for the entirety of the tour, confirmation of the travel in, the travel out, per diems being paid, etc., etc. Building up a big picture for the UK border official to think, yes, of course, why should I not let this person in? That's basically what you're trying to do. And the advantage of that, as far as the artist is concerned, is that the work burden sits with us, the presenters, and therefore you avoid the language issues, and also it doesn't cost. So all of those time and money experiences that you have in the artist applying for them in advance go away in effect, really. But as I'm sure this has been covered in previous sessions, it's equally unpredictable. We've had artists arrive at the UK border, declare that that's what they want to do, and everyone on duty doesn't know what they're talking about, which is quite interesting. We find that if they come by rail or car or plane or even different airports, that the process of where that kind of kicks in along the way can be different, inconsistent. And there is a big risk in as far as it's very easy, like many of us may do if we go on holiday, to use the e-passport gates and just enter as a tourist or a standard visitor, and then walk away from the airport without the stamp in the passport to say that they have permission to travel. So it relies on a clear briefing that they have to declare they want to apply for a PPE visa. And that is actually quite hard sometimes to get that information across, should we say. Anyway, really briefly, I would also say that, of course, some artists may need to stay for longer than a month, in which case this route isn't available to them. And even though we haven't over the last couple of years, previously to Brexit, we were working with a number of artists from what we call visa national lists. So that's everyone beyond the EU, the US, Commonwealth countries, and a number of others. And they need a whole different system and a visa application in their own country through a certificate of sponsorship approach. And I haven't really got time to talk about that right now, but we might touch on it in the questions if that's relevant to the kinds of things that people are exploring. In terms of our overall challenges, I would say that obviously negotiating gov.uk, particularly in the immediate aftermath of Brexit, was quite challenging. All the information was very clearly not there, and it was quite inconsistent for a while, but it's getting slowly better. But we have found that perhaps beyond the visas, some of the other considerations are far less predictable, and it's taken a while to build up enough of a knowledge to really feel that we know how those things work. In terms of freight and movement of goods, 80A carnets, as we now know, which in essence is a passport for freight or goods. I think we now know that in most cases, the artist applies for that carnet in their own country, and the process, where they get it from, how they apply for it, and indeed the costs seem to vary nation to nation. And we have found that there are some complicating factors with carnets that we now start to ask some questions in advance. We had an artist whose show from traveling from Europe involved food, which was consumed during the performances. So the food was coming in, but it wasn't going away again. And then all manner of issues start to arise where the bill of what comes in starts to differ from the bill of what goes out. So there are some complicating things that you have that mean the carnet route sometimes needs additional focus and work in order to make sure that it runs smoothly. And again, there are things we can follow up on that later. And then there's international VAT, and I fully admit that that's probably the one area that we're still massively learning about. It seems the VAT status of the artist and the company seems to dictate whether it's charged or not, and the percentage rates depend on both the fee and country to country. That seems to change too. And we are finding more broadly that at the moment, more artists are not charging international VAT than are. But that's something that we're very much watching, because I think we've still got quite a long way to go to properly and fully understand that. We're asking the right questions, but I don't think we fully, more knowledge about that will be very helpful. In terms of looking back on the last 2 years, I think we've had to be prepared, and we've stepped up to offer a lot more advice and help to artists that we're inviting in order to facilitate them accepting those invitations. We've had to develop quite considerable and quite dull systems from scratch in order to be able to do that additional work. And all of that has created quite a massive additional time burden that wasn't there before. And anything that creates a time burden creates a massive money burden. So it has costed quite a lot. And the other thing I'd also add is anyone who's thinking of touring to multiple sites, that the process of drawing together the paperwork for a PPE visa on the border, where you're dealing with multiple partners and multiple proofs, the work does tend to square or cube quite easily. So that's quite a big job. And then the final thing that Sylvia asked me to talk about was the concept of permit-free festivals. And I'm sure there are, Norfolk and Norwich, I'm sure, will be on this list, which is something that's quite new to us at GDF. We joined this list, I think, officially in the middle of COVID. And we took some advice because it wasn't quite clear exactly what that meant in terms of what it allowed us, and we're about to change. We're in conversations with the Home Office at the moment about what that means, and it potentially will help us cut down on everything that I've just spoken about in terms of going forward for some of the things that we do. But the list is a list of festivals who are able to invite entertainers and artists to be paid for their participation in those events, and they can enter by what we know as the standard visitor route. To be on the list, I think you have to have been in operation for 3 years, to reach more than 15,000 people for each of those 3 years, and to invite 15 artists who are non-UK or Irish based. I'm quite sure of that delineation for the last 3 years. And indeed, you have similar plans to attract similar numbers for the year to come. I did look on the gov.website yesterday evening, and there's something on there that implies that anyone making an application for that status at the moment, if they've not been able to reach those numbers or invite that many artists over the last couple of years because of COVID, that will not be used to penalise those applications. So there's potentially a opportunity there, I think. But as I say, in theory, that status does allow us not to if we're inviting artists that are just coming to us, GDIF, as a permit-free festival, we don't need to go down the PPE route. But what it doesn't do is really alleviate the challenges for Global Streets, because those tours are visiting multiple venues, and many, if not all, of the other partners are not on the permit-free festival list, and therefore one has to go through the same process of PPE visas. Anyway, covered quite a lot there. I'm sure there's a lot more we can talk about in the questions, and looking forward to that conversation.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Toby. Yeah, you did cover quite a lot in just a few minutes, so I'm sure that will give us the chance to explore a bit more later when we're having a discussion. But for now, I would pass on to Jens to hear his perspective on this as well.
Very much, Sylvia and Toby. I think it was really interesting for me to hear all the details. I'm not really so much involved in the visa and all these issues around getting artists in and out of the UK. And after hearing you, Toby, I'm quite glad for that, because it's really a complicated thing, I can hear. But we have actually had to allocate a lot of resources from our budget in order to make it work. And as far as I have experienced, it's actually been going quite well, but we had some, from time to time, we had some artists who got stuck at the border, where we had to do a lot of arrangement in order to get them in. But at the end of the day, it's actually getting solved. So it's been going quite smoothly. But my biggest concern in all this has really been the budget, that it's cost a lot of money, and it makes a lot of things very difficult. I can say from the Danish side, because we are at Passage Festival every year, we are inviting UK artists, and we can also experience that it's become more complicated than before. It's basically a new dimension in the way of working with the exchange of artists that we have to deal with. There's always been some bureaucracy, some red tapes from country to country, but with the UK it's now been quite solid, and I really hope that we can, in the long run, that it will be possible to find some more permanent, easy solutions on this. And I'm also very glad that Extract is bringing this up, because I think it's really important to have associations like you, organizations like you, who can help in these matters and kind of gather all the information that is, all the experience that we are getting by working like this. I must say that in So Festival, we have been working on actually changing the concept of the festival in the way that we have been moving away from presenting big productions, meaning that we have been much more focusing on community work, and also building relation with the local communities in the area. And we just got a new NPO where we got an uplift, and a part of that is actually also to bring out the festival more in Lincolnshire, to start working with other people, other organizations, also to share more of the festival content, and also to hand out competence and to democratize the festival more, so that it's not me and my colleagues as outsiders who are doing all of the program, but we're actually involving people more. And part of that is, of course, also to deal with these matters regarding to Brexit. And I mean, in the way of distributing the competence of how to do an outdoor festival, this has not been easier with Brexit for sure, because it's getting more and more complicated, you can say. I also want to say that I think that I think you sense that very much in different European networks, and it's absolutely sure that everywhere there's a huge interest in getting all these issues solved as quickly as possible, because you can for sure say that the UK street art is a huge part of European culture and European festivals. And I know there's a lot of things going on in order to find ways on how we can keep on exchanging between the continent and the UK, because it's such an important thing for all of us. Then I want to say that actually it's also a new dimension, I think, related to public space. You can say with Corona, suddenly there was a lot of restrictions and it became very difficult to work, and there was a lot of restrictions regarding a lot of festivals was cancelled. And in Denmark, we had the opportunity to actually still go on doing the festivals, although there were these restrictions. And it means actually that there was a lot of new type of interesting projects that kind of came out of that situation. And I think that about Brexit, that it's also something that we are seeing happening in Skegness, as 80% who have been, I think it was about 70-80% who voted actually Brexit. So it's a place that have always felt very remote and very far away from of course, from Europe, but also from London. And for us, it's also been an opportunity to actually bring in artists who want to address this issue in an artistic way, and getting people involved in a more principled conversation about what kind of relation are we going to have in the future. And this is, I think, also a thing that is, we don't know exactly how this is going to end, but it's something that is looking very interesting, that artists also seem to be interested in working in a new perspective with their artistic work coming from this situation. I don't know how much more I actually have to say, because I think Toby actually covered most of the practicalities and the more principled issues about all the visa thing. And my perspective is a little bit different, coming from very interested in building relation with UK artists, with UK festivals, but also running a festival in England and Skegness. So it's more on a principle level, you can say. So I think we should actually open more up for a conversation about the questions about this issue.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jens. Thanks for your addition to this topic. And I think now we will have a fair bit of time for people to bring in their own experiences. And if you have any questions regarding the issue, I know we've had some questions coming through the registration phase as well. So I would kick off with one of them, if you don't mind, just to get started. So there was someone who couldn't join today was asking about engaging artists from France as part of a festival in the new year. So it would be helpful to know experiences from others regarding pitfalls and required arrangements. I think Toby already covered a bit of this, but if anyone else wants to bring any other experience of bringing European artists to their festivals in the last couple of years and what that entails, any positive or negative, I have a feeling that there might be a few negatives, but I don't know if maybe Elsa wants to share something, or if anyone else has any more questions, please feel free to come in.
Maybe, what do you think the consequences might be if artists just did come in as tourists, if they haven't got a lot of equipment? There's really no way that anybody would be suspicious of them, especially if they're coming for Europe, if they're European, traveling on a European passport. I'm not sure anybody would notice, frankly, unless you.
I mean, I think, yeah. I mean, it absolutely happens, I'm sure, and I think, like you, I can't really see what the mechanism would be where that would in any way likely to be like, I can't really see a mechanism whereby that would be picked up. I think in terms of the factual answer to the question, what would the ramifications be should someone in some way kind of like find out about that? I mean, whatever the kind of way that you kind of phrase it, that would potentially, I think, create serious issues going forward for any kind of application for that organization, whether it be certificates of sponsorship, anything else that they may do in the future. I could imagine that would become immediately quite challenging.
I mean, if you'd done all the paperwork or whatever process you were using, and they just thought, I'm not curious, because you've got a queue and then you're going to be cross-examined by people, and they just say, fuck it, I've got a passport, I'm just going to go through the e-gate.
Go straight through.
So I'm guessing that you as an organization would be able to say, well, we actually asked them to, here's the email, asked them to do it. It's down to the individual, but I just wonder though,
I think technically, legally, actually, it's not with the individual, it's with the organisation bringing them in.
But you can't go to meet them on the wrong side of.
But you can't do that anyway, can you? No, absolutely. And so, and I guess if you're waiting for them on the other side of the barrier and they didn't go through the right kind of gates, there's nothing you can do. You can't take them back through and do it all. So it would become quite complex. But at the same time, I think we go to quite extraordinary lengths to make it very clear in the paperwork that they present that this is what they need to do. If it went wrong, it would be a relatively easy, if dull, case to make that ultimately it was set up to work in this kind of way and it didn't. If one needed to do that, I guess that you'd start to build a case around that.
Yeah. Can I just mention one other, sorry, just what?
No, can I jump in on that first, Jeremy? Just because
Sure.
I was thinking that too when you were saying it. So we're at NNF, we're a permit-free festival, and we've been one. I've been at the festival for 4 years in January, and we've been one like way before my time. And again, obviously, I'm not an expert on this. I just Googled it and looked at a few websites. So this is what I understand, but again, it's not like legal advice, obviously. But as I understand it, if you're a permit-free festival and the artist has a letter of invitation, they can enter via the e-gate. So actually, that's fine.
Yeah, also, PPE, which most of us will be using.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. If you're a permit-free festival, you still need to issue an invitation letter to allow them.
Yeah, that's what you need to do.
Yeah. I mean, so the admin is down to a page of A4, but actually, if you're not on that list and you are in essence asking the artist to declare that they want a PPE on the border, you have to make it clear to the artist that they do need to, in essence, queue, declare that, and go through that process. I mean, ironically, I have had artists who've said that actually the queue to do that was quicker than queuing up for the e-gate. So yeah, you can't tell. I mean, sometimes it works.
Yeah.
The other thing I would also say specifically to the French query is that we have found very broadly that artists arriving by air have a bumpier time of working out and negotiating with the UK border what they want to do than artists, say, for instance, who come by Eurostar in Paris or Brussels or Eurotunnel, where the processes seem to be far more embedded within the standard route that anyone goes through. So I haven't had any issues at all with anyone coming on Eurotunnel. They come through the Eurotunnel, they get processed to Ashford. There's a special lane for people who are asking for those kinds of things. It's all really clear. There's even a sign, I believe. Yeah, if you're coming from France and you're driving, I think the Eurotunnel route it's relatively easy to work out what you need to do. It's a bit more random when you're coming by air because there's, of course, lots of airports that you could arrive in, and it's kind of down to who's on duty.
Yeah, two things you didn't mention, which are small but actually beneficial. One of which is that you don't need a carnet if you come by plane or train. I don't know why you don't, but you're bringing I suppose because you're bringing so little, and they just you've not got freight. So if you've got groups that are flying or training or can do, and that could be a great advantage. They could perhaps send their stuff by overland freight, in which case the freight company will do all the paperwork. The other thing is, and this slightly surprised me, is that European citizens and residents and a few other people still qualify for the British single tax allowance, which is to do with income tax. So if you employ somebody from America, you've got to deduct income tax or gross it up and make a FEU application. So anybody from Africa, anybody from outside Europe, but Europe and some other countries, you can still pay any individual up to, I think, 12,500. And you only need to apply for an exemption if the figure's higher than that. So you might have a big group where it is. So you have to apply for exemption, but show that each individual is only earning £500 or whatever it is. So that hasn't changed as yet.
No, and I think FEU is a whole different department.
I know, but it's part of it. If you're doing international work, it's something else you've got to.
Yeah, and if you're inviting artists that are coming to just your festival and those thresholds aren't met, then ultimately they're not going to get penalised by that tax. It becomes more complex if they're doing multiple dates over multiple places, I guess. But.
We have a question from Rebecca, I think. Please go on.
Yes, hiya. So I hadn't heard before that people coming by the train don't need a carnet form. is that for the Eurotunnel as well? If someone was to take that caravan on, say?
No, it's Eurostar.
It's
Sorry.
just Eurostar, that is. Okay.
And trains and planes, I suppose the assumption is that you haven't got freight.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem, so
okay, so you just got suitcases really, and that's not a bother. Okay. All right then. I had another question, which I think a couple of the artists that we're having over are taking this on risk. I'd just like to hear anyone's experience on it, about having a certain amount of money in their bank account to, is it 4,000 or 7,000? I've got those two numbers in my head. Do you know what I mean, Toby?
Yes, I do. We took some consultancy from a freedom of movement specialist in the immediate aftermath of leaving the EU, when we were planning how to get through the first summer.
Yeah.
And we had quite long conversations about that. And the advice that she gave us then, which had been run by, I think at the time, lawyers, was that actually it was belt and braces, basically. So we formed the letter or the pack or the evidence that we were creating very clearly said that that they were being paid this fee, and I think it was even broken down to this fee per day, and it's relatively kind of high level, that all of the expenses of every type were like covered. And then we also advised them, rather than instructed them, that they should come with proof of funds. And that was deemed enough. We didn't give them what that means, but ultimately a sense that actually, because ultimately I think if you say you demonstrate proof of funds as well, it sort of undermines the case that you're making in the letter that all the expenses are covered for. So we went for the idea that ultimately they are coming to the UK and their trip is legitimate and fully covered in terms of costs. They aren't going to need anything while they're here. Food and accommodation are paid for, they've got a per diem, etc., etc., etc. So then suddenly say, oh, by the way, I've got all this money in my bank account, kind of then makes the customs official thinking, well, can I not believe what's written in this letter? That's all a little odd. So we didn't add it in as an official addition thing, but we did perhaps, we do indicate that it would be sensible for them to have access to that information should it be asked for, and it never has been.
Yeah, because I don't know anybody that we've invited that could actually prove that. So that's good to hear. It
becomes really complex because, and also I think you're starting to kind of like, it's a very awkward question to ask.
Yeah.
Any artist, isn't it really?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, and at one point, I think we were looking at the advice was, well, you need to get copies of the bank statements and then they need to be kind of like PDF'd into the letter. And I'm thinking that feels like that's crossing a line,
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like it's a comfortable way of approaching this. And we found a different way out of that.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
I'm not sure, but I think you might, because there's so many documents to read, you maybe have been reading tier 5, I think it's tier 5. There's basically, say, an actor who gets a gig working in a show in London, say, for 3 weeks. So they're kind of on a contract to work rather than coming to do a touring show. And I think they have to show, because they won't be getting all those expenses covered, they have to show they've got enough money in the bank. I suspect that's what you've read.
Go on, Irene.
I was just going to echo what Toby was saying, and I think just reflecting on the experience of taking some UK companies over to Spain recently, what we did, because we felt like it was extremely invasive to have to ask people to produce a bank statement of any sorts, and we weren't really sure if they were going to be asked for it or not, is we did exactly what Toby was saying in terms of we actually created a template letter that the festivals who were inviting those UK companies would fill in, that had exact details of where they were staying, what was exactly being covered, basically saying these people won't need any money while they're here because we're paying for everything. And that was extremely useful. I mean, some of them were checked at the borders, some weren't, but I think it's like with the 88 partners, I think it's all a matter of risk and how much risk you're willing to take legally and officially. If you're bringing in any sets or props or anything that represents a movement of goods, you should be doing an 88 partner, regardless of what means you're traveling by. But it's really up to you. And, I don't know, if you look at different kind of dance shows that have very minimal props, no one's really going to question whether those teapots that you've got in your luggage or actually for a show, or for you to give to your grandma who you're going to see. You know, it's kind of really up to you in terms of risk, I think, and that's where you need to also look at your own individual sort of situation and what the festival is also kind of willing to support you with. Just a point of clarification.
Hi, Lisa. I see you're putting some comments in the chat regarding how you managed to bring over the props. We said our master sports equipment, which is true. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have talked about this before in like maybe the last session. I was just responding to the I always mispronounce your name. I always want to call you Irene. It's so wrong.
It's fine. Don't worry. Can I ask something while I'm here? I was just wondering if Toby and Jens would like to reflect on whether Brexit has had an influence in terms of your criteria for presenting different artists. So has it meant that you now look at larger scale projects as slightly more problematic and therefore shy away from them? And I wondered if maybe, Toby, you could give us the perspective from bringing in EU-based, not European, because there's so many Europeans living in the UK, but EU-based companies over to the UK, and perhaps Jens, you could give us your perspective on bringing UK companies over to Denmark. I'm just interested in seeing if that's changed the kind of artistic criteria in some way.
I'm happy to dive in. I'm quite glad to say no, which is, and possibly at the beginning I might have imagined that it would have done by now, but no, it hasn't really. I think there are questions we probably asked slightly earlier in the process than we would do beforehand, and like we'd be stupid not to, really. But I think we know enough about what the implications are of the decisions that we're taking. But I don't think I can think of an example of something you're thinking, they're from there. No, we can't do that. I mean, and in terms of the scale of the work, that I think things have changed, but I don't know whether they're really solely to do or even remotely to do with Brexit. I would say that actually my approach to programming has been influenced quite considerably, I think, over the last 18 months about trying to create a far smaller environmental impact. And so that has changed who we've invited and the way that we've organized tours and the way that we have monitored how well we're doing there. That's had a much more significant impact on what we're doing than any potential restrictions or increased admin burdens of where they come from and what might be needed.
Do you mind if I come in again? Sorry, I'm not pressing it, but this is as a follow on from that. I was going to mention this at the end. Surf, we're going to try and organise a informal meeting of festivals who want to present international artists who might be interested in touring and sharing. So it's kind of obviously it wouldn't be Surf with Salisbury because it's too far apart. So it might be a series of smaller meetings within one big meeting. So that will be on the day leading into the conference in Bradford. So any festivals who are interested in having that discussion, and in fact, the origins of ISAN and now Outdoor Arts was festivals in May who used to meet together, and we did share groups. This was before cheap flights came in, and it was actually a more economical thing to do. And we all kind of stopped because of Ryanair. But given our new, the bigger concerns about environmental issues, that's something we would like to see if we can encourage more of. So any promoters here, and perhaps you could pass the word around, and Angus will be sending out information about it. We just like to get everybody who might be interested in talking about those possibilities in a room.
Yeah, we are basically thinking, having some of the same thoughts about this, that it becomes more and more rare that we are actually booking big scale shows because of first of all environmental reasons, that we really see, is the show necessary, does it really achieve what we want to achieve, but also in terms of impact on the environment. It's becoming more and more a huge question. And we are also, because Skegness is a little bit remote, also in Lincolnshire, so we are looking much more into how can we share the companies that are coming, that we are bringing for the festival. Can we find other organizers in the region that also want to program them? And we're also trying to develop concepts where this is actually possible. It's completely new at the moment for us, so I can't say that we have succeeded with anything yet, but there's a huge interest for this way of thinking, which is very much in the direction of not being so original or exclusive, but more and more about sharing and be including other in the region about the artistic projects you are working with. And it's the same situation in Denmark, basically. And I can say in general, I think that there is a tendency that you back more and more off from these big spectacular shows and fireworks and all this for more environmental reasons. We also do other program other things in Denmark and Sweden, and it's the same thing. And when we are using fireworks in Denmark, for instance, there's always editorials in the newspaper. Did we have to do that? And what do we want to achieve? And in these times, is that the thing to do? And I think that's extremely positive, that people actually engage and are reflecting on what you're doing, and also putting a pressure on you to think in a more environmental direction. And just to add briefly about Brexit, Brexit also didn't have the big impact on us as such. It seems like it's become there's a lot of bureaucracy, and we also had some situations where it was a little bit risky, but it hasn't been that, and we are kind of used to that also. I would say everybody who works on the continent also knows that there are some differences from country to country, and there's always been differences with the continent and the UK, so we're kind of used to work with issues like that. But it has become more complicated for sure. It's not to say that everything around Brexit is fine, because it is a struggle, but I think what is really the hope in this is that we want to work together, and the UK plays a huge part on street theatre festivals on the continent also, so we have to find ways, for sure.
I think I'd also add that thankfully all of the artists that we have been in conversation with and have ultimately moved towards inviting to come have come. I mean, assuming that everything kind of like proceeds. At the beginning, there were probably 2 or 3 companies that I was dealing with directly who were slightly rabbit in headlights, thinking, oh my gosh, how does this work? And it's our responsibility to step up and help them through that, support them through that. And we did do that, and they came and it was all fine. And that fear has dissipated, I think, as probably companies have seen others managing it and it all working. So yeah, we haven't lost anyone because they just can't be bothered to go through the admin. They may have made us work harder in order to make it happen, but that's life.
Hello. Oh, go on, Elia.
I have a question. Could you enlighten me around the cabotage rule? Because I've read something that might have changed for a while as well, but I've read something that you have to come back to the UK after 2 stops in Europe and then return to the UK before you can continue. So if we were to think of a more feasible, longer EU tour, would we need to stop back in the UK meanwhile? Does anyone know?
Full disclosure, from my point of view, I mean, my work in this area has all been about bringing incoming artists into the UK, and there are a whole different range of challenges if you're UK artists and you're visiting European countries or wherever it may be. And I wouldn't pretend to be an expert on that, and it would be inappropriate for me to kind of fumble my way through that. But I'm sure there are people on the call who would be able to step in there. From what you just said, that resonates with a company that I have done some work with, but I would not like to say much more than that.
I think Daniel, you had your hand up, didn't you?
You are muted at the moment, Daniel.
You're on mute, Daniel. You need to unmute yourself. Yeah.
Does it work now? Yeah, okay, that's great. Sorry, I joined in late. The cabotage rules is that we've just toured 24 gigs last month, did different venues, and if it's your own vehicle, then you don't. So it's only if you hire somebody to transport your goods, then cabotage rule is thing. If it's your own vehicle and you travel with your own stuff, then there is no cabotage rules. It doesn't apply. We've gone to the government department. We've got it from various kind of people, and so there should be no worries.
And that is also
that's only, for example, if you're London Symphony Orchestra, you've got a driver, you employ somebody, they drive the vehicle with your goods, but it's contracted to do somebody else does that.
So the situation for us is we do have a truck trailer that we own ourselves, and our production manager will be driving with his truck, with the truck trailer, basically. Would that then be classified as it's our own vehicle?
Yeah, I mean, the cultural media, I've got an address, a direct link that I could get you. I've got a contact person that has got a very definitive answer to that.
That would be great, Daniel.
So I don't know how we get in touch. I mean, if you want to send an email to me.
Happy to. If you give me your email, then I can do that. Yeah.
Or send it to us, Daniel, if you prefer. We'll just put the two of you in touch, or if you want, we can share it with the group.
Yeah, because we had this big problem, and we went all the way, but it's now a year ago that we sort of sorted out, well, just over a year, that we sorted that all out. And I mean, we've now been many times touring longer tours in Europe, so it's not a problem at all.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question that's also on a little bit of a tangent from the actual subject of this discussion, but I would be really interested in talking to anyone who has had a sponsorship license. Member is almost certainly going to get one because of someone that we really want to employ, and I'd really like to talk to somebody about the difference between a skilled worker visa and a temporary creative worker visa. Be about the skilled worker visa route. I now know a little bit more about creative workers, but yeah, if that's anyone in this group, let me know and I will pick your brains. Excellent, Dom. Great. Expect to hear from me soon. Thanks.
That's great. Our being able to find answers, even though some of us don't have them or the speakers don't have them. There's always someone in the room, so it's always worth sharing and asking.
There's, if I may, there's a similar problem around driving vehicles into Europe regarding a weight restriction, which is some rule about you now need a international freight license or something like this for vehicles above 2.5 tons. But what, I forgot your name, sorry, said earlier, I wonder if that is a similar deal as if you're doing it commercially as a freight handler, then you might need that, but you might get away with it with your own vehicle. But I would quite like to know.
I don't know if Anya's raised and is to answer this or if it's a different question.
Different question, not in answer to this.
I'm not sure if we have an answer for this specific question then, Rob.
No, but it's probably very related to the cabotage rules and falls in the same curb as that. But I've been pondering that for a while. I didn't get an answer yet.
There seems to be a few questions around cabotage and transporting vehicles, and so Maggie was just suggesting maybe we can do a session in the future just on vehicles and and transport. That's a new one.
There's lots of different rules in different countries. So for example, in Spain, it's not so much about the weight, but it's about the height of the vehicle. So we recently kind of had a company who had to transfer onto a lower trailer truck to be able to circulate. And then there's a whole load of differences in terms of what days of the week you're able to circulate during or not. how much time you need to take off in between and rest periods for drivers. So it's all very different in terms of the countries. So I think that a session focused on kind of movement of vehicles and driving your own or not, and different rules will be useful. We can certainly use some of the resources that we've already got and dig a little bit deeper into some of those if people would benefit from it.
I probably won't join that conversation, but so can I just mention that rest days also apply if your drivers are also your technicians, which they very often are. So we have a group coming to surf next summer who are the vehicles arriving a day early, specifically so they can have a day off before they start putting the setup, and they've told me this 3 times. So I've never come across it before in all these years. I think most groups don't probably give a toss, frankly, but do bear that in mind. And you may get that also going to a festival. They may say, well, what about your brakes? Different if you've got a dedicated driver, but yet another thing to add to your list of things to compile.
We only have 1 minute left, so I think we'll need to wrap up. But if you have any burning questions, please do get in touch with us via email and we'll try our best to answer. For now, thank you everyone for attending this session. Thank you, Jens and Toby, for your sharing your experience with us today. We're planning to do more dealing with Brexit sessions in the new year, so we'll share the info on our website and on our mailing. If you'd like to share your own experience at one of our future sessions, or you know of someone who has an interesting story to tell, please do get in touch with us. And we also have further Brexit resources available on our website. My colleague Irene will now put the relevant links in the chat for you. And finally, before you close this Zoom session, please answer our short survey about the session. It will only take a couple of minutes, and it's really useful for us to gather your feedback. Thank you once again, and we do hope to see you. And well, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.